between these two experiences as well, I did take the confirmation class from the United Church. As you know, they baptize babies, and just like the Catholic Church, then you're confirmed. You get a chance to make your own decision afterwards. Again, lots of good spiritual things, but without that born-again perspective, and that makes so much of a difference. It was when I met Melissa, though, that I saw really practical Christian love in action. And I remember when I was courting her, and just realizing it as the words were coming out of my mouth, saying, God wants us to be together. And it was her example that was very helpful to me in many ways. One time, we were out for dinner at a buffet restaurant, and she says, how's your roast beef? And she's a vegetarian, and I wasn't. And I said, it was okay. And she said, well, good. You know, and her love for me was greater than this difference between us. That spoke to my heart. Another time, we were watching that 6-hour mini-series about Jesus. You may have seen it. I can't remember the guy's name, the actor who played Jesus, but here's Melissa crying during the scenes when Christ is on the cross. And I had never thought about it in that sense that it was that real for me, you know. And then, of course, another time, I could name more examples, but another one was she loaned me her copy of Ellen White, Prophet of Destiny. And I actually believed Ellen White was a true prophet, probably a good 6 months before I became an Adventist after reading that book. Now, when I finished my reading of the Bible, together with her, we did a reading of those Uncle Arthur, those red children's storybooks. And that basically got the whole Bible over again right away, the whole theme, the whole storyline. And then after that, our marriage preparation class somehow turned into a Bible study for me, which was also a wonderful thing. And it was there that I learned again that through Christ I could be clean. And you can't have any real peace of mind even in this life, let alone the hope for heaven without Jesus, you know. And something else was different too, because every week as I was considering what I was being shown, not only was I falling more and more in love with the Lord, but I was being shown a complete circle of truth, where every individual truth related so well to every other truth. It formed an impregnable circle of truth that I couldn't poke any holes in like I was able to with what I was being shown 3 years earlier from the Pentecostals. And it all related back to the cross, and that makes it so important. It's born-again Christianity that makes the difference, that adds the power to the doctrine. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of rules. Now, for a lot of people, this is where their testimony might end. For evangelical Christians, you read what they have to say, that's where it ends, right? I was a sinner, now I'm saved. A lot of times the stories are very moving, they're very wonderful, they're very important, it's good, that's great. But we're different as Adventists because we don't see doctrine as something separate from the salvation experience. So by mercy and truth, you want to call that Bible verse back up? By mercy and truth, atonement is made for iniquity. He gives you mercy when, you know, if you were a cocaine snorting prostitute for 20 years and all of a sudden you're in your right mind again and you're able to clean yourself, your act up. You know? He gives you mercy when he forgives you for all kinds of things you've done. But he also gives you truth when he shows you the better way. He says, walk ye in it. And so here's the better way that I've shown you. A number of things. Here's where my testimony continues. And again, I will repeat, I am thankful for everything the Lord has done for me, including where he led me through in the United Church and with the Pentecostals and Baptists that I did associate with and what I learned from them. It's not to trash them. But I was learning a deeper point of view here, studying with an Adventist wife and an Adventist pastor. I used my Good News Bible. She used her NIV, and he used King James. So that also gave us a good, well-rounded study. And even on the basic things, we looked first at the Trinity, and we looked at creation and the atonement, and how Jesus' death on the cross was not just for any one individual person, but for the whole world at the same time, and for all of human history. It's being shown a plan of salvation that encompasses more than just Christ died for me. You know, when you hear those words, a lot of people interpret them from the sense of man's point of view.
But what I was being shown was the history of the world from God's point of view and what God had done for the world in giving Jesus to us. And even the understanding of forgiveness was a much deeper understanding. What I had from my childhood was basically everything is written down on a piece of paper up in heaven. Every good deed you did over here, every bad thing you did over here. And you ask for forgiveness, he takes a rubber stamp, forgiven on it. But that's not what it is. It's a complete wiping out. Like you clicked and dragged and highlighted it with your mouse and hit delete, and it's gone. You got a blank page. A complete restoration to innocence. That's what I cried over, because that's the promise that was given to me. And that's what made everything else so much more worthwhile. And I'll talk about some of the other things, doctrinal issues that I learned. And the point today is not really to prove what I learned is true. Most of you already agree anyways. But it's really to show you how what I believed enhanced my walk with the Lord. To show you that doctrine is definitely a part of the salvation experience. So I've got 7 points here. Point 1. When I grew up, I was basically taught, everywhere I was taught was God. Whenever they said the Old Testament, this story, that story, it was always God did this for Israel. God did this for Joseph. God did this for whoever. Right? And so I was left to think of that as the Father. And then all of a sudden, the New Testament, Jesus does this, Jesus does this, Jesus does this. So you take that train of thought to its logical conclusion. Unless you end up getting it corrected, you can only think of Jesus as a deified man, because you can't find him in the Old Testament. But one of the most important things, Garrett, just a second. That was one of the most important things I learned, was it was God the Son. He's the front man for the Trinity through the whole Old Testament. According to Isaiah 59, 1 and 2, we're cut off from the Father by sin. So it was Jesus who appeared to Adam and Eve and talked to them that day. It was Jesus who appeared to Hagar and to Abraham and Sarah and Moses and Joshua and Samson's parents. And one of the ways this was confirmed was actually in this Bible that Melissa gave me as a souvenir, commemorative gift once I got baptized. New King James Bible, you look through the New King James in the Old Testament, every time you see angel of the Lord with a capital A, that's Christ. You know? So I think that's very, very important. It affects how you understand your theology. That's why Jesus is the lamb, slain from the foundation of the world, because he was with the Father and did all those things. And the plan was started right there, and the plan was being worked step by step right from there on. Point 2, before we studied out the Sabbath, the pastor gave me 3 other studies. One was on the 10 Commandments, the other was on the ceremonial laws, and the third was on the difference between the two. And this is where we covered Colossians 2, 14 to 16, talked about the difference between the Sabbath days, what it says there, the ceremonial Sabbaths, in the institution of the 4th commandment. And as for the Sabbath itself, he showed me the Bible references from creation through Old Testament times into the church and in the New Testament and on into the new earth in Isaiah 66, 22 and 23. And then we had a study looking at Sunday. And we covered, I think there's 8 references to Sunday. I think we covered 6 of them, 7 of them. But we noticed how not one of them showed any real significance to the day. It's just a mention. It just happens to be that day that such and such happened. You know, the 5 on the resurrection, and then we looked at the one in Acts where the man fell out the window, and the pastor showed me how it was a Saturday night, you know, and then a little bit more on that. All this was after we had studied confession, forgiveness, justification, and sanctification. And so by now, I was falling in love with the Lord and wanting to go back to church to express that. And Melissa was very nice when she said, we can't keep 2 different days or we'll get nothing done. You know, so I decided to give her church a try. And I don't know exactly when that happened, but by this time we were regularly attending.